Welcome back. This is the second time in a couple of weeks that I've had to re-record a video from start to finish. Earlier today, I analyzed a few of my recent rapid games from Lichess, and not only did I make a bunch of mistakes in that video, but the website had a few problems, and I forgot to update the my rapid rating because I lost that rapid game in my previous video, so I just decided to delete that video and try again. Here is my rapid game from last night on Lichess. I have got checkmated here on move 58. According to the graph, there were a couple of points at which I had a lead. Looks like just two. These over here were very minuscule leads, +1, +1.2. So I'm not going to count that. Here I was up +2, and here I was up +3.4. So those 2 points I'm going to look at. And I looked at them in the video earlier today, so I should have a little bit of insight as to what went wrong here. One thing that went wrong in the video that I made is that I forgot which shortcut key got rid of the right column stuff, and it was the Z key. I played knight captures d6. Well, and the reason I did that, it was my plan all along. I had just pushed this pawn to move this knight because that knight was guarding that pawn. So now that the knight moved, I took that pawn, but that was a mistake. And I'm trying to remember what the analysis earlier today said I should have played. I think it said f4. And if I'm not mistaken, it also said they would not take here with this pawn, but they would instead play f5, and I would take it with my g-pawn. And I think the other thing it said I could have played here was g4. And I spent a lot of time on that, and I didn't understand it. I'm going to go ahead and click on the lines to make sure I remembered that correctly. Now it's saying g5 is slightly better. f4 is the I'm pretty sure it was reversed earlier in the other video, but maybe it wasn't, because g5 is a lot better. In fact, at this point, f4 would have been a mistake because it's a full point difference here. Okay, so I needed to play g5, and it says that they would go ahead and play f5 anyway. They would play f5 no matter what I played. Okay, so if I played here, they would play f5, and I would take it with en passant. Also, if I remember correctly, earlier it said if I played this, then they would have two choices, either f6 or f5. If they played f6, I would take with my knight. But if they played f5, then I would take with the pawn en passant. So I think the reason that I need to play g5 here is because I'm supposed to know that they're about to play f5. That's the only thing that I can think of. But I had no idea they were about to play f5. I thought they were going to take this bishop. And I thought if they take the bishop, I'll take back. I might as well pick up a free pawn in the meantime. And then I have a passed pawn. There's no pawns in front of this one or even on the adjacent files that can stop it. And then at some point I'll move a rook behind it, but I guess I should have been more worried about this. And if I were a little better at chess, maybe I would have guessed that f5 is going to be what they're going to play next. And in fact, after I took that pawn, f5 is still one of their top two moves. They can take the bishop, again, which I thought they were going to, and they're ahead. Or they can play f5 and they're about the same distance ahead. My opponent, who was apparently better at chess than me, knew that they were supposed to play f5, and they did play f5. So they were ahead for several turns. And here I was supposed to play f4, and they were going to take the bishop. They wouldn't take here. I don't know why. Or they wouldn't take here. Again, I don't know why. Well, I didn't know I was supposed to play f4, and in fact, all the times that I have moved my f-pawn, it has been either a mistake or a blunder, so I'm very, very hesitant to move it. But very often when I don't play it, it's what I was supposed to play. I'm not sure why, except that I ended up, falling behind even further here by taking that pawn. One idea that I had when I got this knight out from in front of my newly passed pawn is that I assumed they were going to take, probably. I didn't know they have multiple ways of taking that piece, but I thought once they did that, I was going to push this pawn forward, and then I would have a route to this rook, and I could exchange the bishop for the rook instead of for the knight, and then there would be no piece left here for them to take. But that turns out to be really bad. As long as they just take the knight, which they did. And again, I have to play g5. I'm going to be way behind even if I play g5 or f3. If I play g5, it says they're just going to take it. Well, probably. And if I play f3, then they're going to push their e-pawn and I'm going to move my king over. Pretty sure if they pushed that and I had already played f3, I would just take it. But I'm not sure. I did what I said I was going to do. I played d6 to open the bishop's route to the rook. Well, they're supposed to take here, and they did. My opponent seemed to know what they were doing. They seemed to have a plan with, these pieces all lined up here, kind of pointed generally at my king direction. They're up -5 if they take, and they did. And I'm supposed to play king to h2 now, even though I thought they're about to play here, and I would probably take, and then they're going to take the rook, and then I'm going to take back, and it looks like pretty close to mate here in just a few seconds. But I took the rook out of desperation, thinking I was lost, and of course I was here if my opponent played knight to f3 check. If they did that, I would have to move to the corner. They would play here because this pawn's undefended, and then it says I would give up my queen for the knight. I don't know that I would have thought of that, but I might have realized I was about lost. I don't know why I wouldn't have given up my bishop for the knight, but it says I would have given up my queen for the knight at that point. But again, why not the bishop? That's the whole point of the bishop still being on this diagonal. They also could have taken the bishop and been just fine. But instead they took that pawn, which is check, and I have to get out of check. It says it doesn't matter which one of these two I go to. I went to h2 thinking they might be tempted to check me again and the bishop can come back. But I also expected they would take that bishop at any time, like right now, but they didn't. They did that. Now, I'm not sure why they did. Maybe they wanted to checkmate me down here and, they couldn't because my bishop could see there, but now my bishop can't see there. So I got really scared. I'm about to be checkmated on g2. Well, I thought of a couple of things here. One, I thought of taking the pawn because then my bishop would still be seeing g2. I thought of checking here, but then their king would move over and what would I have left? I realized their queen and king were lined up so I could, pin the queen to the king with this rook, and I did that. It turns out to be my best move. So I'm ahead. Again, my opponent should have checked here, which I think would have been great because then that would have been double protection. I would have had to have gone to the corner, or it says they could have brought that knight back to block my rook from hitting their queen, which I kind of thought that they were going to do, but instead they went here. And then I realized, oh, maybe that was the best move. It wasn't the best move, and I'm still way ahead because I went ahead when they pushed this pawn. I don't know why, but I went way ahead here. And I'll stay way ahead if I make one of two moves. There might be a couple of more, but the best one by far is to check, not take the pawn, but to check here on d5, which they'll just move over. And then for some reason, I'll play rook to b1. I don't know why, but I didn't know that I had to make a pointless check that they could easily get out of. And I also further didn't know I needed to move this rook over. I thought I needed to take this pawn to avoid checkmate. Not that they were going to checkmate me here because their knight's in the way, but my bishop used to be seen down here. Also, they can take it at any time, so I needed to get it out of there. But for some reason, taking the pawn is really bad. Now we're even again, but only if they check here. Now, of course, if they check here, that's a fork of my queen and bishop. That's why I shouldn't have taken the pawn. Okay, this blunder I do understand, and that's why I should have checked. But if I had checked and they had moved over, yeah, we came across this when I tried to record this video earlier today. I had to play rook to b1 or queen to c2. Now, queen to c2 attacks this pawn and defends that, and this rook defends that, but doesn't defend the pawn. So if both of those are my top two moves that keep me at +3, it looks like the point is to defend this pawn. But that pawn's not under attack, so I never would have thought of that. It is one of the few pieces in my position that's not defended, but I mean, the other pawn's not defended either. They can't attack this pawn right now, right? They can't come down here and attack this pawn because my queen's there. They can't attack it from c3 because my rook is there. How else? Why do I need to defend that pawn? And if not, then what are the point of these two moves? And rook to b1 is better, according to Stockfish. Anybody knows why this is a good move? Let me know. But again, I do understand why this is bad because of this check. It's not an elementary blunder, but it does give up a piece through a tactic, which by my definition is an intermediate blunder. My opponent found it, and they found it quick. Look at that, 3 seconds. Which makes me think that they were planning that as far back as when they moved that pawn there. Because here, if I had taken it, that again would have been their best move, and they would have gotten my bishop. But way back here is when I didn't take the pawn, I instead moved the rook over, and that took them 9 seconds to figure out to block this, this problem here. So it tells me that they must have been expecting me to take that pawn, and they didn't, so they had to think about this move. But then when I did take the pawn, they didn't think about it at all. Immediately went there, having planned this when they pushed the pawn, is my assumption. Well, I've only got a couple of legal moves here. It says my best one is f4. Well, this time I figured that out because I thought if I moved down, I was probably going to be in bad trouble. But either way, they would have taken the bishop. So I played f4, and sure enough, they took the bishop. But we're still relatively even. But I have to bring my c rook over here behind that pawn, and I did not realize it. So this was like my final blunder that put me down here because I took the knight. I thought I had to. Of course, they're going to take back with the pawn, and my best move is to take with the queen, which I did, figuring if I get them to trade queens, I might make it out of this. I have 2 more pawns than they do. I have 3 passed pawns. The problem is that 2 of them are not defended, and I can't defend both of them. I can defend this one with the king, and I guess I could defend the other one with the rook, but my opponent has a passed pawn too. I have to think about that. I should have immediately played rook to d1 according to the engine. I still would have been behind, but I had to protect that pawn, it says, even though that pawn can't go anywhere. I thought I could stop this pawn because they can't defend it, so I went over there. But it turns out they can defend it, and that's a blunder because they can just do this and win the rook for the bishop, and then I don't have any pieces left and they have a rook. But my opponent didn't see that. They came in here instead to protect the pawn, so now, what do? I can defend this pawn, or I can push that one. So I pushed that one, they put the rook in front of it. It says it really doesn't matter what I do, but king to g3 is among my best moves, so I guess that's not bad. I'm surprised I didn't do this. Oh no, because I must have seen that coming. But anyway, I was lost here. If you understand, any of you understand the problem here, how I should have found G5, why I should have expected them to be playing F5 on the next turn and I would take it. Maybe I'm just really bad at defending my castled king, and that's one reason that I'm becoming more and more hesitant to castle. But anyway, if you understand that point or this point here, no, this is the one I did understand. Okay, you don't have to explain this one to me. I know why taking the pawn was wrong. We figured that out. Okay, let's go into the next game. This is the game from the previous night, and I remember why I resigned in this game. It was because of a misclick. A move earlier, I had thought that they were about to do some sort of discovery here on my queen. So I am positive that I selected my rook and dragged it over, but when I released on the E8 square, my queen moved there. And so I started looking for the resignation button. The idea was, when I was here, if I put my rook here, if they came in to check me to reveal this attack, well, I could just take that knight. And if they moved it over here, I could just take that knight and my rook would be here. Maybe they would trade rooks, maybe they wouldn't, but maybe they would trade queens, maybe they wouldn't. Also, their queen would have been undefended at that point if that's how it went. That's why I was moving my rook over. But once I went there, I started searching for the resign button, and they played here, and I found the resign button. So that's a misclick. There's no reason to analyze this game. And this is the game from the night before that, which I won by checkmate because of my opponent's blunder on their last move. Right here, I had just moved this rook over. My idea was to, maybe trade off a rook. I thought my rook in the endgame might be a little bit, more powerful than the knight because it can cut off entire files. It can get around the board much more quickly. They have a couple of extra pawns, but, I was thinking about coming in here. My opponent must have thought that too, because when they moved over here, that's the only possibility for that being a good move is to protect that square. But now this is checkmate, and I saw that pretty quickly. Looks like about 3 seconds. So, I'm glad my opponent made that mistake, but earlier in the game, there were problems. Right here, my opponent was up about +1 according to the engine, maybe a little less, and I played queen to b6. I played queen to b6 because that knight's undefended and that pawn's undefended. I thought it was a fork, and I was getting my queen out of this. It's not really a pin because there's 2 pieces there, but I see now, and I remember from the video earlier today that that's a blunder because it leaves this bishop hanging. So I should have played, it says knight to c5 or bishop to b4. I guess knight to c5 targets this bishop. It's probably not going to go anywhere. It says they would just play queen to e2, and I wouldn't take it. I would then play knight to e6, which is here. Oh, and then the bishop would be fine. Okay, so the point of going here is not to target the bishop, and then they would be not protecting the bishop here. They would be lining up on this. Okay, I get that. I didn't get it in the video earlier today, but for some reason I saw it just now. Maybe because I followed this out a little farther. They would line up on my bishop, hoping to win it, and I would come back here so they wouldn't get the bishop. Then they wouldn't take it? Why not? It says they would go in here to target the bishop. Oh my. Well, I wish I had found that, but I still would have been behind a little bit. Instead, I went here, and they could have just taken, but they didn't take the bishop. They still would have been pretty far ahead. It's as if they had just taken this pawn. And then when I took back, then they would have taken the bishop, and chaos would have ensued. But instead, they did that because the opponent saw the same thing that I saw. Undefended knight, undefended pawn. They protected both of them. I can't get to that pawn, and the knight's defended. The problem with that is that I can now get this bishop out of danger. I did not think of that. I saw I can push this pawn to attack this knight. Stockfish would have just taken it, and I would have taken. They would have checked here, and I would have taken with my knight, and it doesn't show what move 14 is, but I assume they would have taken my queen. So why would I have taken their knight if they did that then, knowing that they could do this and get my queen? And of course, the bishop's still undefended. Well, I can kind of see why I'm lost, but yeah, I don't know why they would take the pawn. My opponent just got that knight out of danger and simultaneously attacked my queen, and I'm supposed to put it back where it came from, but instead I wanted to keep defending this pawn, so I came over here, and also I'm defending the bishop now. But now it's again says they should just take this pawn. They didn't figure that out. They were aiming over here. My best move is knight to e5. Oh, this is one point in the video earlier today where I got frustrated because when I said e5, I thought it was here, but that's e4. But yeah, knight to e5 is here, which threatens the queen, and I guess it's kind of a fork. It says they would move the queen over, and I would take that. And they wouldn't take back with the queen. They would take back with the pawn, and then I would play rook to d8, which is, wait, here? Oh, because our queens are facing off, I guess? Yeah, I think if I had played this and they had moved over and I had taken that and they had taken with the pawn, I would have taken their queen immediately without thinking. But that's not how it says it would play out. But instead, I blundered by playing here. The idea was that they would take my bishop and I would take back. And if they tried to take with the rook, I would get that too. But they're not supposed to take the bishop. They're still slightly ahead if they do, but they're supposed to play queen to e4. That's e4, right? That's what it says. And it says I would play f5. I would not play f5. Would I? Oh, queen to e4 threatens mate. Oh, I would have lost the game if they had played that because I would have taken the free bishop. Oh, wow. Yeah, I would have lost. Oh, my. But they took the bishop, and I took back with the knight. And my opponent is still slightly ahead, again, if they play here. But now if they play here, I can block that, with either one of these knight moves, and I'll be okay. But instead, they brought this other rook over. Interestingly, here, it says if they had played this, and I had blocked with the knight, it says they would have taken this pawn. I would have got my queen out of the way. And then a little further down the line, they would have played rook a to d1. I followed that out in the previous video. And in this other scenario where it says they played queen to g3 and I would have played queen to f6, then they would have played rook a to d1. Of course, my opponent hopefully wasn't looking at that at the time, but they figured this was a good move. Good for them. I never know which files to put my rooks on, but my opponent figured it out. They're still up +1. I need to play knight to c6. Oh, I guess to defend that pawn? But I just went over here because I didn't want any shenanigans over here on h7, and that one turned out to be kind of okay. If they play queen to g3 or h3, they'll be fine. But instead, they played here, and I'm supposed to not take it. Honestly, at this point, I think I was willing to give up that pawn. It would give them a passed pawn, but it would be separated from its brethren. And I thought, I've been trying to develop this bishop for a long time, but I never got a chance. I thought, why not develop it, skewer that queen to the rook, and when they moved the queen, I would get the rook. That actually turns out to be my best move, and I'm not sure why. I just did it because I was frustrated by not having developed the light squared bishop, so when I did that, their best move is to take this pawn that I just left undefended, and I thought my best move would be to take that rook, but it is not. My best move is to give up this pawn and attack the queen, and it says they wouldn't take that pawn, they would just go up there. I don't know why they wouldn't take the pawn. Why wouldn't they take the pawn? Oh, it says they should take the knight now, or they could take the knight. Why wouldn't they take the pawn? Because now I would take the rook, and then they would take the knight, and I would take the queen, and they would take here, and then I would take this pawn, and I'm ahead, even though they can take here. I'm going to take here and double those pawns, and then I'm going to take that pawn, and I'm just ahead. And they're not going to make any move to protect this one, like putting the knight back here. They're just going to play g3 or bishop to f1 and let me have that pawn too. Okay, well, that's a long series of things that didn't happen. I thought I was supposed to take the rook. I thought that was the whole idea of, I'm giving up this pawn to get this rook. But when I did that, it took away a little bit of my advantage. And each move after that did the same thing. I played a slightly less than ideal move. Couple of inaccuracies here. If you look at the move list, 1, 2, 3, 4 inaccuracies in a row. You can see them on the graph there, those 4 dots climbing that little mountain. Each one just lost a little bit of my advantage, None of them blunders until my opponent was ahead. But as we already discussed when we got here, my opponent had some faulty wiring or something and didn't realize that if they moved here, it's checkmate. Because right now I can't checkmate them because they can get out if I check them. But once they come here, how do they get out of checkmate? How long did I take to play that? 3 seconds. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure I understood much of what went on earlier in the game, but this seemed really simple to me. That seemed like an elementary level blunder. By my definition, an elementary blunder is just hanging a piece, missing a hanging piece, or giving up, mate in 1, mate in 2, real simple checkmates. And that's what my opponent did here. But I think my blunders, those 2 that we discussed, I think those were at least intermediate, if not advanced. Anyway, this video went a lot better than the one earlier today, and I think I understood more of the problems that I had in this one. So I guess I should be grateful that I, had the time today to redo a video. I don't always have that kind of time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the helpful comments. I'll see you next time.